You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling. And now, here's your host, John Cross.
You're a big fan of lights.
Well, where I am right now, where I'm living, staying, whatever. It's one of the fourth coziest places I've ever been, okay. And it's a lot like your mum's old gaff, in the sense that it's all lamps. So while there are 3 lamps on up here, and I have enough light for what I'm doing, you just can't see me.
That's probably for the best, right?
Well, because I've got a big old bum face.
Exactly, yeah, you got a bum for a face. Who needs to see your face, right?
Right, when it's a bum.
Yeah.
And you've frozen again. So it looks like I'm going to be doing the whole podcast looking at a blurry frozen... Oh, no, you're back. Oh, good. Okay, excellent. But I'm lying on a couch.
You're quite blurry.
Well, I'm blurry-brained because we're leaving this later and later, and I don't know how good that is for my sanity. But how are you anyway? How have you been?
I'm all right. I'm knackered. And I don't think I had enough tea today.
Well, that is a shame.
Well, because I've got like a caffeine headache, which I didn't even realize. I was like, I've got a headache. And Teresa's normally making me like 2 or 3 cups of tea a day. And she wasn't feeling very well today. And so if Teresa doesn't make me tea, then tea doesn't get made. But I think I kind of a bad headache because I didn't have any tea, which is a mad state of affairs. But
why didn't you make yourself some tea? You big lazy.
I'm just really busy.
You big lazy gobshite.
Working all the time.
Oh my God! Look at you pretending like you're important on the planet.
No, I'm not. But money and keeping me alive is important. You know what I mean? But I'm not.
Well, again, I don't know how much keeping you alive is important. I mean, it's important to some of us. It's just not important
to me.
Yeah.
Important to me. I don't think the United States of America can give a shit one way or the other whether I am alive or dead. They probably prefer me alive because I'm spending money, but then they probably prefer me dead because I'm taking up space.
Yeah. Well, or England for that matter. I mean, I don't think either place wants us particularly.
England doesn't want me. No, they don't need me. They don't need the likes of me.
No, they've got enough.
What have I got off the world, eh? Bugger all.
They've got enough Jimmy Carrs and Graham Nortons lying about. They don't need the likes of us.
They don't need a cross between them, between the two of them, do they?
Well, you're hardly that. I would much rather watch, the Jim Wallace Chinwag hour than I would watch either of those two.
I think I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, Graham Norton's fine. Jimmy Carr's twat. But I would much rather watch the Jim Wallace Chinwag, mainly because it would be you, like the show would start and you'd have good intentions, but then you would, something would interrupt the show. You'd need more tea. The headphone wouldn't work. Something. And it would just be 15 minutes of you faffing before the show actually began.
There would be lots of faffing. I'd interrupt people. I'd take food delivery orders. I'd cough. I'd make noises that, even though they're quiet to me, are really loud and off-putting on like the microphone or whatever.
Yeah, and I would love that. That would be my personal favorite show that had ever been made. It would, I don't know if you've ever caught, I don't know whether Teresa watches daytime television, but Kim watches daytime television sometimes just to have on in the background while she's working.
Right.
And sometime around like noon or whatever, Rachel Ray comes on.
Right.
And Rachel Ray is as far as I can fathom it, is in a perpetual state of either drunkenness or nervous breakdown, like either one. Like she could go either way, either day.
Okay. Right.
Like any minute she could either be absolutely drunk and throwing coleslaw everywhere, or in the middle of a nervous breakdown and throwing coleslaw everywhere.
But coleslaw very much the link between the two states.
And all I'm saying is I feel like your show would be equally shambolic, but in the best way. I would enjoy it immensely. So
you're saying I'm a cross between a drunk and having a nervous breakdown?
No, I'm saying the shambolicness of a drunk having a nervous breakdown. You would equal it. You would equal the shambolicness of it.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's both fair and accurate, I think.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to start this particular episode with a comment. Because between the last episode we recorded and this one, you're
how long has it been? Like a month?
No, 2 weeks.
Okay, so we only missed 1 week.
What do you mean you missed it? What have you missed? You haven't missed a week. Oh, you mean we didn't record last week? Right, we missed recording last week. Right. Yeah, but nobody cares. Nobody cares.
No, I know that nobody cares. It's more like I have no firm grasp on time.
No, neither do I.
It seems like months ago that we did Christine.
Yeah.
And it seems like last year we did Trucks, but I guess not.
Maximum Overdrive.
Sorry.
So, your brother, talking about cozy places, and it was your mum's birthday recently. So happy birthday, Canned, if you're listening.
I doubt she is.
But anyway, she's lovely, and her house was always lovely growing up. And like I said, it was always cozy and lamp filled, or like there would be a lamp that would work. Like you would have to maybe
one really weird
move bulbs around.
Palm tree lamp on top of the wobbly telly that had like one of its leaves had fallen off.
Yeah.
Like most things in that house, it was broken. Like a bit of it was broken.
Yeah.
I realized it doesn't matter. It's a fucking lamp. You turn it on and there's light. Yeah. And that is literally all we care about.
That's the baseline.
It's pink.
Yeah.
It's a pink palm tree.
Yeah.
It's got bits of its palms broken off.
Doesn't matter.
And all it does is sit on the top of a wobbly plastic telly.
Yeah.
And is hardly any interior decorator's idea of a bullseye.
Listen, someone somewhere thought that lamp was a good idea, mate.
I just feel like when I think back at that house, like nothing worked. Everything was a bit broken. The door didn't shut. The lamp had a bit broken off it. Our inexplicable 4-foot porcelain leopard had a tooth missing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you think back, there was a tile that was loose on that.
There was a drawer. There was a drawer.
You know, the weird like gas like fire thing that we never turned on.
Yes.
Because every time we did, because we turned it on once and we actually left some socks on it or something, and it burned the material onto the fire. Yeah. So every time we turned it on, it smelled of burnt socks.
Then there was the fact that the kitchen fell apart, like slowly fell apart.
Oh yeah, there was the top drawer. Every time you forgot that it didn't work, so you pulled it out, and then eventually, like Mum glued it shut.
Well, that was the funny thing.
That was us. So don't repair the drawer. Right. Glue it shut. Walk away. Seal it up like a cursed tomb, and walk away.
Like a cursed tomb of diseased cutlery.
Yeah.
She just glued it. Well, that was it. Like it slowly fell apart. And you had to remember. And then about a year before she moved out, she just went, oh, fuck it, and just glued it. And I always kind of just responded very well to that mentality.
Yeah.
Like I always liked that mentality. But I was, in telling those stories, I'm providing a link between me talking about how cozy I am right now, the coziness of Westcombe, and then your brother, John Wallace's comment that he made 2 days ago on YouTube's, where he was listening to the Christine episode. And I wanted to start, although we've already started the episode, the first comment I wanted to read was John's comment. And I thought you would enjoy this. And here is the comment.
Okay.
It didn't escape my notice that there was some speculation in this episode about the existence or not of a shed round my way. The answer is there is a shed, and that it is a shed in the true meaning of the word. That is to say, it is a place of dust, spiders, and damp, where nothing can ever be reached without causing some house of cards collapse. The place is essentially one closed-off, teetering mound of junk that is at the same time completely useless and utterly precious to us. Who are these people with comfortable shed leisure spaces? I would attempt to build my own shed sanctuary if I didn't know that the instant I erected it, the thing would fill with moldy shoes, knackered prams, bits of foam. Ooh, that'll be handy one day. And whatever else I don't have the guts to sling in the bin. I am in awe of your shed-based listeners. For me to listen to the show in my shed, I would have to mount a highly unstable junk pyramid, prodded by sharp edges, breathing cobwebs, with one knee resting in some mystery fluid. An ordered shed eludes me and will forever. This is something I have come to accept about myself. We all have our demons, and mine lives in my shed.
Well, the demon is the shed, by the sound of it. The demon is... I mean, the thing is, right, if I still lived in England, next time I was around John's, you can bet that I'd be cleaning out the shed.
Right, exactly. That would be your job.
I would be cleaning out the shed. And then about halfway through, I would begin to regret that decision massively. Right. But I would keep going. And then at the end of it, having nearly killed myself cleaning out his shed, John would see my efforts, complain about something that was missing, and then go back inside and eat a biscuit. And that would be the nub of it.
Yeah, although you did clean up the basement at said mum's house.
I did.
And you did make it...
nearly killed me.
You did make it jolly nice for our teen years when we would be reprobates down there smoking and a drinking and a smoking.
It's right, but at what point do you think did we become people who would never, ever go to that place now?
What do you mean?
Because the sofas were damp and it was full of spiders and everything was dusty.
I would sit in that cellar tomorrow. I don't know what you're talking about.
I guess it's the damp sofas, I suppose.
Well, I wouldn't sit, like, if you're saying, like, we left it in 1999 or whatever, whenever it was, 98, whenever, and then we left it and it stayed there, and then we went back now, 20 years later. No, I wouldn't do that because it would be a cesspool of filth and urine. But if you're saying, would I travel back to the year 98, 99, whenever that cellar finished its peak, and sit on those damn sofas, yes, I would. Yes, I would. Yeah.
There was the opportunity of like a quick access through those steps, except Mum went, we could have quick access, or I could put a washing machine on top of that. Yeah. Like trapdoor. It was weird place.
But that probably worked because of what we were doing in the basement.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although there was definitely a sealed off cursed tomb bit of that basement too, because remember I nailed up that board thing because I don't know what was living. There was a whole ecosystem of darkness.
There was. Well, there was a separate room that wasn't really a room. It was like a closet-sized room, but that closet-sized room was filled with goblins and filth and urine.
Goblins, filth, and 1970s management technique books.
Yes.
Like that my dad must have read every single book that had ever written about like managing and marketing that had been published between the years of 1972 and 1981. He owned the lot and presumably had read them and then kept them in boxes for me to discover and be singly underwhelmed by when digging through years later. So when you find a box full of mystery books in a cellar, right, you're expecting treasure, basically. Yeah. Like, what's going to be in there? Like
an Agatha Christie first edition.
Yeah. Right. Agatha Christie first edition, the Dead Sea Scrolls, something with a naughty cover, like just anything.
Oh, but porn! No, you're always hoping for porn in a dank cellar.
When you're 14. But book after book of management techniques in advertising in 1973 edition or whatever, with an introduction by Gregory H. Horncastle. Just couldn't be. Oh, and just because you really want to buy it, here's a picture of a graph with a red line going upwards. Give me the book.
It's funny because Gregory H. Horncastle is next week's guest. He's going to be. We're going to be doing Glengarry Glen Ross, And Gregory H. Horncastle is going to come on and talk about
his words that I spent my teenage years next to his slowly dissolving words.
Slowly dissolving words. Gregory H. Horncastle.
Gregory H. Horncastle. Yeah.
So that was John's comment. So John does have a shed, but there is no potential.
Well, I just think that's lazy. I think that's lazy. I'm calling him a lazy bum.
For shed
in the middle of a pandemic with nothing else to do.
Yeah,
he hasn't cleared out his shed and turned it.
I mean, he does have a job. He does have a job, a wife, a daughter, and a novel that he's been writing.
That's a good point. But like doing something like that,
because he is a famous novelist, and people should check out johnwallace.co. Is that what it is? Yeah,
johnwallace.co. Or go to Waterstones or wherever people sell books and buy the Kensterbeck trilogy. The
Kensterbeck trilogy, which that doesn't help because if you ask someone for the Kensterbeck trilogy, they might not know what it is. It's Barricade, Rick,
Barricade, Rick, and Darren.
Barricade,
Barnaby, Rick.
Rick. No one's getting married, Michael. I'm talking about Mary.
Mary.
Sorry, Barricade, Rig, and I'm going to forget the third one right now.
Well, you already have forgotten it because Rig is the third one. It's Barricade, the one you've forgotten, and Rig.
Well, what's the one I've forgotten then?
Steeple,
that's it. Barricade, Stephen, and Rick.
Yeah, Barnaby, Stephen, and Rick. Yeah. No,
seriously though, go find the Kensterbeck trilogy, Barnaby, Stephen, and Rick by John. We're just confusing people. John's listening to it and being like, "Oh, they're just confusing people." Barricade, Steeple, as in here's the church, there's the steeple, whoops, all the people, and then rig, as in oil rig. Go find it. It's a kind of
it's better than cleaning out a shed.
It's better than cleaning out a shed. Oh, and it would be perfect for our shed-based listeners to recline.
Oh, yeah, they would really enjoy it. Put your feet up in your shed. Read a book.
They're leisure sheds. Now,
read a book in a shed.
Now, there's the thing. Did John invent it? So, how was it lady sheds or woman sheds? What were they calling them recently? Like women were having there was in my women's shed. There was that advert on TV about it as well. And like people
in my women's
was
shed.
Was it lady shed? She shed. That's what they were calling them. She sheds. So you have she sheds because for some reason gender specific sheds. Then you have regular sheds, which are the sheds that I believe John is talking about. But I think what our listeners have are leisure sheds. Kind of like leisure suits, like the kind of shed where one would wear, some sort of velveteen jacket, like a leisure shed. You know what I mean?
I do, yeah.
Where a pipe could be smoked without nary judgment, without anyone coming by and being like, "Are you smoking a pipe in there, laddie?" In a judgmental fashion.
If you owned the shed, if the shed was owned by a judgmental Scotsman, that might happen.
I don't think Robin is a judgmental Scotsman. I think his friends are judgmental.
Saying, if you're sitting in your shed,
yeah.
If you don't want people to come up to you and say, "What are you up to, laddie?"
Yeah.
Don't smoke your pipe in somebody else's shed.
Right.
Preferably one that's owned by a grumpy Scotsman.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
And I feel like the Scotsman, and it's Robin, right? Robin, our listener, who has the chicken. We still don't know the chicken's name. So, Robin, if you're listening, email us about the chicken's name. But he clearly had judgmental friends because they chastised him for having curtains in the shed. And I feel like that is one judgment too far. Don't come between a Scotsman and his curtained shed mate. That's what I'm saying. Agreed. So, this week, we are talking about Repo Man. We're talking about Repo Man because we did Maximum Overdrive. Then we asked the question, is it King or Estevez? Is it King or Estevez? And answer came there, King. So we did Christine. And then we were looking around for a potential Estevez. You mentioned Repo Man because Repo Man features essentially a killer vehicle, although it's not the vehicle doing the killing. It is something in the vehicle. However...
But it then becomes the vehicle, so functionally...
It does. But then it closes out what is a ramshackle hodgepodge of a vehicle-based Emilio Estevez and Stephen King trilogy.
Rather nicely, yeah.
Rather nicely, yes.
Neater than some of our seasons, for sure.
Or Samovar.
I think. I don't know.
I think Samovar isn't it a container that you can put like, isn't it like some kind of flask or container?
I think it's one of the things that you put tea in when you're in like a village hall or whatever.
Is that what it is? Like one of those big...
I think so. I think that's what a samovar is, I think.
Okay. So anyway, we're talking about Repo Man, Emilio Estevez, Harry Dean Stanton. It's made in the 80s by our warty friend and yours, Alex Cox, who we first became aware of. Now, I have to ask you, Jim, because you're a little older than I am. Did you first become aware of Cox on Moviedrome, or were you already aware of Sid and Nancy and others before he did Moviedrome? Moviedrome was what introduced you to the gloriously tombstone-teethed and warty-faced Alex Cox, who, of the two Moviedrome hosts that we grew up with, him and whispering Pretencio Mark Cousins, he was the preferable one of the two hosts.
Yeah, I'd say he was more preferable. He was he was more of a film enthusiast than a film critic, I would say. So he wanted to share things he loved about movies and ask you to watch out for things, that he thinks you would, that you'll enjoy, rather than flaunting his own cleverness in the guise of.
Well, I mean, Mark Cousins seemed... So Moviedrome, for people who don't know, but especially people in America, Moviedrome was probably the closest English people ever got to a horror host or a movie host as we would have over in America, whereby someone dressed up in a thing, did a lot of puns and hosted a movie. The Brits being the Brits, that really didn't happen. Alex Cox used to have kind of slightly more of a sort of movie genre themed opening to his Moviedrome, where I remember especially like a film noir tinged opening with him with cigarettes in an ashtray and like low lighting at like an old privatized desk kind of thing. I remember that.
Yeah, and I remember him hosting American Werewolf in London on a moor, and like punctuated by like far off howls that I think got closer as he continued to talk. It was really cool.
So he used to do more
It was fun and a bit silly.
Yeah, fun, bit silly, and genre themed. When Mark, a whispering Irish twat Cousins, took over, he would do weird things like jet off to Rome and stand in the Colosseum and then like introduce Demon Seed. And you'd be like, I don't understand the connection here at all. You seem to have just used BBC Two's meager budget to fly off to Rome, you hoary old tart.
To be fair, it's not the worst idea I've ever heard.
It's not the worst idea. And you can't, like, on one hand, you can't blame him. But because he's such an insufferable twazzock, you have to blame him. Like, you have to be annoyed.
He can be blamed for many other things. May as well throw that on the plate.
Right.
While you're at the canteen of
he's the guy.
Cousins' shortcomings.
For people who don't know, Mark Cousins is the guy who made a documentary series called The Story of Film, where it was literally about, like, Botswanian black and white still life film from like the 1940s or something. And you're like, obviously there needs to be a documentary made about black and white Botswanian still life film from the 1940s. But he almost, his entire ignoring of anything other than, Latvian poetry photography or like, Ukrainian poverty documentaries about oats or something. Like it was just whatever fucking obscure, boring, horse waddle that he could find, he would put that in the story of film. And I'm sorry, to make a documentary called The Story of Film and completely ignore, Hollywood, Bollywood, British film, Ozploitation, whatever, it's just ridiculous. I mean, of course there's European art cinema. Of course there's, Ukrainian and Russian black and white, poverty staring out of a window. My lot is a potato in a bowl and that's about it. Of course those films have value, but don't call your documentary Story of Film and then just like ignorantly just be like, well, all of Hollywood is shit. And I'm just going to, focus on, German expressionist stuff or fucking, here's a thing made in Tehran in, 1962 that features a guy with a mustache and a Kalashnikov or whatever. You're just like, I mean, nobody
fucking
cares.
Iranians making movies. Bastards.
No. I'm just saying.
Oh, I get it. You're just sticking it to the Iranians.
No. Tehran is what I said. But like
isn't Tehran in Iran?
Yeah, it might be. But what I'm saying is,
you hate Tehran.
No, I'm saying
and all movies made in it. You find it boring.
No, I don't.
Why can't people tell you about the history of Hollywood again?
No, I'm saying that Mark Cousins obtusely makes.
Did Spielberg make films? What was that about? Talk to me about Spielberg. I'm just being a cunt now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you are. I'm saying that. Look,
you
are standing up for Cousins, which is on this podcast.
No, I have some sympathy.
Tantamount to standing up for fucking
doing
Commode.
A history of film where he doesn't feel the need to tell people things they already know.
No, I get that, but
otherwise you could just watch those Channel 4 things of like 50 brilliant Star Wars moments.
Yeah, no, I get
as told to you by Phil Jupitus.
No.
You know right, I mean?
And I'm just saying
57 times Phil Jupitus thought something was funny.
There's a middle ground.
To express how little I care.
There's a middle
Phil
ground.
Jupitus thinks about anything.
There's a middle ground between Phil Jupitus presents 40 moments someone fell over on film,
right,
and Mark Cousins wandering through the streets of Oblomov,
I know, but
wherever.
I understand. But I have some sympathy with the idea of if you're going to make a documentary about the history of film, then talking about things that people don't know about might be seen through a certain prism to be more useful than rehashing things
and if it
just for the purpose of showing that clip from The Thing again.
If it was hosted by anyone else who I didn't want to punch violently in the nose.
He's an absolute arsehead.
Yeah, he is.
And I've got no doubt that he is only doing it for his own, precisely to look clever and sound interesting.
I think him and Commode probably sit around and talk about what latte.
No, there's no way. They probably, like, when they meet, they, like, repel each other. I mean, they're so similar. Like, they can't occupy the same point in space-time because otherwise the universe can't cope with it. It's, like, that much...
Yeah.
Like, that much pointless smug.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you smug about the fact that you really like films that you think other people don't know about?
Right.
Like, that's where you get your jollies. You don't want to share. You only want to be admired. You want to be admired for your curated opinion about everything.
But I wonder, and I don't know if this ever happened, but if Mark Cousins ever hosted Repo Man on, or any of Alex Cox's films on Moviedrome after Alex Cox left?
It's Possible.
I wonder if that ever happened.
Repo Man seems like a kind of a movie drone kind of movie. I'm kind of surprised that I've never seen it, given I would have been... I don't know, it would have been like around on TV when we were teenagers, right? Like Repo Man at that point would have been...
I watched it when I was a teenager, or certainly late teenager.
Okay, well, I never
seen
saw
it by
it.
the time I went to college.
I'd never seen it. Yeah, but you went to film school, mate.
I did go
So
to
you
film
were
school.
all you were all long black overcoats, and
I did wear a long
and
black
the Turanian cinema of the 1960s.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it was like how
Much
many.
as you try to reinvent yourself now as a bearded everyman, we knew you when it was all expensive cigarillos.
Yeah.
I mean, designer overcoats and Iranian cinema.
How many people living in poverty with tatty corduroy jackets can smoke cigarettes and look out of windows in Tehran in black and white? The answer is...
Well, that's why you don't like it. Because
many.
Did you find out later that they'd already stolen your cinematic thunder? Because wearing tatty corduroy jackets, smoking and looking out of windows was very much your speciality, I seem to remember, in the world of film.
It was for a brief moment.
For a brief moment, you shone, and then you realised that the Iranian cinema of the 1960s had already done it, and much better, and in fact, in a way that got them noticed by Mark Cousins, and you just gave it up.
Yeah.
You gave up film. No wonder you're bitter. No wonder you're bitter about Cousins of the Iranian cinema of the 1960s.
I mean, the one that your brother wrote, Randolph's Alice, definitely... And it's funny because we did a movie drome beginning of that with John playing Mark Cousins as a sketch, introducing the movie. And then the movie, that movie in particular was very, Cousins-esque. It was very black
Cousins
and white.
would have approved.
He would have approved.
Cousins' stamp of approval, yeah.
However, the one I made...
If you'd poured tea over the negative and punched some holes with some cigarettes in it or something, and then told him it was from Latvia in 1952, he'd have been all over it.
He would have been. So this film from Latvia in 1952 talks...
It's incredibly ahead of its time. It's almost like it was filmed last week. By an idiot. But believe you me, the idiocy is very much a disguise for deep ruminations.
But yeah, there was definitely about that. But by the time the next film I made, Breakfast in Bed, came about, there was some smoking and looking out of windows, but there was also a lot of running around being hit by a car. Well, actually rolling off a car and having a car drive over my legs.
Do you mean committing suicide?
Almost committing suicide.
Like it was a borderline suicide attempt.
Yeah, and then
in the name of art.
There was a whole slasher bit where I was running around Ronnie's old house, and then there was an action finale where my friend Adam, wearing a floppy hat, shot me in a graveyard. So that wasn't a lot of staring out of windows. It started with staring out of windows.
You still have these. You're making them sound a lot more interesting than I remember them.
Well, I mean, breakfast in bed. I don't know how interesting it was. It was my attempt to put
kind of mouth agape.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Like I have no
eyes
idea.
Full of disbelief.
Eyes full of disbelief. Although Breakfast in Bed is notable for one thing, and that was John and I sat on a couch, me wearing the most just outrageously awful top I think I ever owned, and us talking, and John came up with a riff about reincarnation, which I still think is like genius and should have been written and put out there somewhere, which is the whole concept.
You should cut it out. You should find... Do you still have all that shit?
I do, on VHS somewhere, yeah.
You should digitize it, mate, and then cut it out and put it out there for the world.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the old Scandia stuff again.
I think John would punch me in the face if I did that.
I think he's probably mellowed out a bit.
If I revealed to the world our 18-year-old selves trying to be interesting, I think that would probably be. I think
people would be able to draw very Well, they would be able to draw parallels between that and who we are now, right?
Oh, 100%.
I don't think we've become any more interesting since then.
No, we've become less interesting,
fatter.
but we've become less interesting, but we've become more self-aware, and therefore hopefully less dickish. I hope.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Like, I was definitely, and I could make a lot of excuses, but I could and did at the time. But I was definitely trying, as I think most 16 to 18-year-olds are, when they're trying to find out who they are and what they believe in and what they think of. I think I was trying to make myself, infinitely more fascinating than I was. And I was trying to make myself something that I was trying to explore my creativity, which, as I say that sentence right now, is incredibly pretentious and awful.
No, I didn't think
but
so. No,
imagine that through the veneer of a 16 to 18-year-old who's horribly lost and weirded out by most stuff while trying to explore his creativity. That's where those 3 films came from.
Well, I mean, I want to see them. Should we talk about Repo Man? I feel like we've been going for a while now and I haven't really talked about the movie.
No, that's fine. I don't know what I'm going to say about it, but you might have more insight. But yeah, Repo Man. It's his first movie in 1984. It's described as sort of a cynical satire of stuff, but I'm not really sure what it's sort of.
I'd say it's more like irreverent than a satire. I think a satire is like what sometimes people describe things as satire when what they mean is sort of poking fun at conventions. And I don't think that's what, like, it feels more like he's like having fun with conventions and just telling a story that he thinks is interesting. No, not even interesting, that he thinks is funny and cool. And interests him, but I don't think there isn't really a message behind it. I don't think. And
he's not being like bitingly satirical either about Reaganomics or about the Cold War or about, like, there's nothing in it. Like, when I think back of sort of most 80s satires, they're normally either talking about, it's either like They Live and they're talking about Reaganomics in America, or they're talking about, aliens are, really communists or whatever, or they're talking about, excess and credit and all that stuff, or they're talking, or they're talking about the kids or whatever. Like, there's normally something. What's odd about Repo Man is it's both a film about nothing and at the same time a genre film, where one of the central focuses of it is kind of a punk aesthetic, both about punks itself, but also like a punk take on filmmaking in general, with a handful of stuff that he's clearly stolen from other people. And I think even admits as much. Like, he kind of cherry-picked stuff that he liked from other people. I mean, like the whole thing with the parents and sat on plastic and, them watching TV evangelists and all that stuff. That's straight out of like Time Bandits. And it's, and sort of the kind of thing that Terry Gilliam would do. And it's very interesting, of course, because one of the big things, one of the big stories about Alex Cox later in his career was that he had to have a writing credit on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas because he was originally working on adapting the Hunter S. Thompson book. And even though all the passages in the film are actually Hunter S. Thompson's, the Screen Actors Guild of America demands that if you write more than 25% of a screenplay, you have to be credited. But the 25% that Gilliam claims that he gets credited for was in fact Hunter S. Thompson's words and not either his or Alex Cox's words. But it was a whole hoo-ha, and Alex Cox had to be either paid off or get a credit on the film. So they do cross paths later on, but there's definitely some Gilliam-esque or moments But again, Alex Cox, he's a Liverpudlian English guy. Like
there's moments of like
he has some sensibilities.
You say about the punk aesthetic. There's moments where it feels like not as funny, obviously, but like quite young onesy.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, there's definitely it. You totally and utterly understand that it's a movie by a British dude. Obviously into punk because he would go on to make Sid and Nancy, but like a probably like a middle class college dude from Liverpool. I don't know if he's middle class, but he like smacks to me of someone that you probably would have met at like Manchester Uni or Reading Uni or something like that, who probably wore his collar up for a bit, and whatever, but who was also like a genre film fan, but also like an irreverent comedy fan, like either Young Ones or Monty Python or Not the 9 O'Clock News or whatever. And you throw that all into a mix and drag him out to America and go ahead and make your like wacky British punk genre film, nihilistic, cynical, alien comedy. And this is precisely the movie you would expect to kind of spit out the other end of that machine, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I see what you're saying. I did find it a bit weirdly unremarkable. And maybe it's because it suffers a little bit from one of those things where you do come across it occasionally, right? Where things that are classic and seminal aren't actually very interesting when you watch them because everything that made them interesting and classic and seminal was ripped off by other people. And so nothing appears like strikingly fresh originally to anyone. And when those things are taken away, it doesn't really have much of a heart or a point. Like it's tough for me I don't really give a shit about Estevez. I could give a shit about Harry Dean Stanton, but he's like not really in it, and he sort of comes and goes in a weird kind of a way.
So do you know why that is?
He's filming something else at the time?
No, like him and Alex Cox fought a lot on set. And so the whole sequence, for example, where Estevez and the other repo dude, the black guy, gets shot at from the guy in the house, that was meant to be Harry Dean Stanton, but Alex Cox had actually fired him and then brought him back onto set later on.
Okay, that makes sense, because there are weird shifts. It's like, why is he with another Repo Man? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it also spoils... this is a funny one. So I put out on socials that we were going to be talking about this, and I got sort of the responses that I was expecting, like everyone talking about, the fact that they love it. It's one of the best cult movies of the 80s. It's got loads of quotable lines. Harry Dean Stanton's amazing. All these kind of comments. And I get that if you saw it at a certain point or a certain place in time and it found that sweet spot in you, that you would carry this film around with you. The weird thing is despite liking a lot of the things around it, like I quite like Alex Cox and I quite like Emilio Estevez and I quite like Harry Dean Stanton and I like weird movies set in LA where nothing much happens, and I like the fact that it feels like a post-apocalyptic sci-fi, even though it's taking place in what is clearly present-day LA. Like I like that it's kind of an alien landscape. Right. And I love the cars. Yeah. You say like the aesthetic of it is really nice. Like I like a lot about it, but my feeling is that and I forget the exact phrase that I used, but I don't have, like, every time I watch it, it's like I've never seen it before. I can't engage with it. Like I can't feel anything about the movie. And it's it's difficult anyway because it's a fairly cold film in terms of its characters, because Harry Dean kind of comes and goes throughout the whole thing, and because Emilio Estevez is playing this like punk with no regard for anybody or anything, even down to the fact, like later in the film when the shootout at the market happens, or the liquor store or whatever that is, like that little bodega market liquor store shootout, that he actually sort of, runs away from Harry, cares more about his old friend, his old punk friend, than he does about Harry Dean Stanton. And the whole thing kind of weird. Harry Dean even sort of weirdly disappears at that point. You're not really sure what's happening to him, and then he shows up later on. You're never allowed because of the punk aesthetic for Emilio Estevez. He's never allowed to like Harry Dean Stanton. Like, they're never allowed to bond.
That's true. Yeah.
And because Harry Dean Stanton is this sort of nihilistic, cynical, grumpy old man guy, yes, he takes Emilio Estevez under his wing enough for the film to
you can't have nihilistic, cynical old man paired with nihilistic, cynical young man. That's no... Like, I'm not saying you need to, it doesn't necessarily need to be a cliche,
right?
But there's a reason why you don't put two people with exactly the same outlook on life together in one car.
Right.
Like, you can, but it just won't be very interesting because they don't... Especially ones where their defining characteristics are not getting close to other people and not caring about other people.
Right.
Like, because they've got no incentive to change, so they're just going to sit there being the same people they were at the beginning of the film, not learning anything from each other, right? Just kind of drifting through their lives, which, that could be satirical. We all drift through our lives, but equally, I clearly I do enough drifting. Do I have to do my drifting while I'm watching a movie? Do you know what I mean? Is that
right.
really where the drifting should be happening? You trying to get me to wake up? Is that what you're trying to do, Coxie? To wake up? I don't really get that either.
And it's sort of... It's odd. It's like, I understand where punk comes from. And there's even points in my life where I feel, or I have felt, punk attitudes towards things. And you could even put on some punk music and I'll be like, oh, I totally get this and jive with this and I understand this. But overall, there's only so much of it that I can be bothered with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I've never been... The reason I like the young ones is not the punk aesthetic. It's that the characters are funny and silly and well drawn, right? And the fact that nothing around them makes any sense, and the logic and the narrative logic of the world in which they live is continually played with and messed with, is fun and effective because the people in the middle of it always stay the same. Like, it's okay to have characters that don't change if everything around them, which I guess is like why this feels a bit Young Ones. But the problem is that I wouldn't like the Young Ones if it was four Vivians. If it was just four Vivians in the Young Ones, right? And then the same kind of messed up thing all around, then I'd be like, well, either okay, but then I'm not. You know what I mean? There's no variety there. It's just the same character. It's Viv. It's that Viv and Rick hate each other. That everybody hates Neil. That Mike is above it. Like there's like things happening in the middle of all this madness.
Yeah. If anything, the bits in the Young Ones that when you watch it now, you're like, ugh, that get on my tits are the bits where they try and deconstruct television or whatever, or like fucking try and be like, oh, I wonder what the plug, the lampshade's thinking, or I wonder what the plug socket's thinking or whatever. And you kind of go, considering some prop guy had to build an oversized plug socket just for some bad joke that Ben Elton thought up in the pub. That's the bit that's really awful. Like the Young Ones is only really funny when it's the four of them. It's why, Bottom works better than the Young Ones actually with hindsight, because, you're stuck with Richie and Eddie the whole time and they can actually write funny things for them to say.
Which is true. But the thing that is effective about the Young Ones is when the logic of the world is twisted. Just for the sake of why not? Like, London, when London floods and, when they're chased by magical creatures, coming out of the wardrobe or whatever.
Right.
Like there's,
but it's not funny when
Jersey drinks a can of Coke that makes him a psycho. Like those things that they don't like. Whatever we need to give us a story, like we need to give a shit.
Right.
That's quite cool because in the middle of it are these really well drawn, relatable characters that aren't likable exactly. In fact, none of them are likable in any way, but they are at least funny and remind you of people. But yeah, like they're not all the same character. Right. And I don't think that what happens in Repo Man is to those characters is interesting or out there enough. Because I know that there's a car with a mystery thing in the boot, but like that comes and goes, and it's never really clear what it is or what's at stake, or why we care, or why they care, or. You know what I mean? It's not really that interesting. Nothing that happens in the movie is particularly interesting when you think about it. Really, is it?
No, I like the funny thing is I do like a lot about the film.
Yeah, me too.
I like the way it looks. The soundtrack's great. I like the fact that he's doing something. It's like a genre film, but it's not a genre film. It's like a driving around movie. But it just never, like there are movies where, not a lot happens, or where it's predominantly about driving or drugs or whatever, that have quotable lines in them that I really love. Like there's a lot of other movies that I would put almost in the same kind of category as Repo Man in a weird way, whether it's With Nell and I, or Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, or those films that aren't they're about everything but they're about nothing, and there's normally two central characters, and there's normally some kind of drug or drink, and it's normally filled with quotable lines about a nihilistic philosophy. I suppose you could also almost throw the Big Lebowski in there with it or whatever.
Yeah, but what's interesting? Just very quickly. What's interesting about all those movies you just mentioned, which is all true, by the way, I agree with you about all of it, but those films are all ultimately about male friendship. It's like what those are all about, right? And they're not, nobody is friends in this movie with anybody.
No. And because of the production, and so there's two problems. Because of the production, and because of whatever movie Harry Dean Stanton thought he was in, and whatever movie Alex Cox thought he was making, whatever clash there happened, you have trouble with consistency, so you can never really nail down the central two characters, coupled with, as we've already discussed, both characters for different reasons have a kind of nihilistic and or cynical outlook on life. Difficult, therefore, to get them to bond on that, because at the beginning of the movie you think, it's going to be like a older grumpy curmudgeon takes younger punk kid under his wing, and they find some kind of, simpatico, and, the old man learns to be a bit less grumpy, and the young kid learns to be a little less punk or something. You know what I mean? You assume that's what it's going to be. Meanwhile, there's a car with an alien in the trunk that's killing people. And everyone is sort of trying to get hold of this car because it has this great repo value on it. So it's sort of like, on one hand, this movie that you'd really like to see but never quite pans out, which is the Harry Dean Stanton, Emilio Estevez movie that is there but isn't there and never quite has any kind of payoff. And then there's this other movie that's happening, which is sort of this madcap, larger than life, aliens in a trunk, everyone's running around, there's no real logic to any of it. There's no real people have relationships in seconds. Other people are caricatures, other people are, cartoon versions or whatever. And it just, none of it really hangs together. And the whole idea is just, there's this car everyone's trying to get their hands on. And then, it ends because the car starts glowing and flies away. And you kind of go, am I meant to get something deeper out of this? Or is it just meant to be cool? And And I think ultimately, from watching all the extras on the disc, I don't think anyone making this movie had anything more interesting to say than, oh, this is a cool idea, or this is like a wacky idea, or this is playing with. I think it's far more obvious that Alex Cox is having a go at playing with a few different genres than he has any interest in really telling a story within any of them. You know what I mean?
I suppose that's the thing, right? Like it occurs to me that, like you're saying, if you can make a film on the basis of, well, we thought it would be cool, and then you see what happens, and it doesn't need to be like a deep need to tell a particular story or whatever. But generally speaking, the movies that work, where people just go, we just thought we'd make something that we thought was cool, that we would enjoy, right, tend to be made by people who have a good time doing it. It seems like if he's like firing Harry Dean Stanton and all the rest of it and having big rows, then he's like behaving like a director with a vision that other people are ruining, right? But there's no vision here. If your vision is, I just want to make something cool, and what you're arguing with people about is what other people think is cool versus what you think is cool, then that's just nonsense, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, you can't make a good film where all you're doing is trying to make something that's kind of cool if the people making it don't like each other enough to agree on what is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was also like, you know, he was struggling with producers and stuff like that. Not that Alex Cox was like some sort of, you know, enfant terrible or whatever, but I don't think he was like, but I think Harry Dean Stanton was the character. He was a grumpy old bugger. And I think he was, you know, he was a little bit like, well, I'm just going to do this. And he was a bit stick in the mud. And I think Alex Cox just was probably a bit of a young upstart trying to make a name for himself and trying to do something a little weirder.
Trying to be free enough to like find his way, I guess. No, I can see that. You're right. That's
and
fair.
It was probably just a case of too many cooks. Like Harry Dean Stanton had an idea, Alex Cox had an idea. But yeah,
that's not to blame. That's not to blame him. That's not to blame him or anything. But I think that if you're going to go in and make that movie, right? If you take a look around at what you've got, and you've got, you know, a reasonably famous lead actor, but who's grumpy and curmudgeonly and difficult to work with, and you've got producers that don't believe in you, and you've got a reduced budget, and you're having to kind of improvise, right? Then I think you can't hope to make something fun. You know what I mean? And cool. You have to, because like cool is so nebulous. It has to be like born out of, you know, collaboration and being in the right place at the right time, and just the right people coming together and making something. But like films that are like that don't tend to be, I think, like hard work to make, generally speaking. And if it looks like it's going to be hard work, then you're going to need to fight your corner. Then you probably need to tie it to something, but you can't fight for something you're not sure what it is. You're hoping to find through making the movie. You're always going to be onto a lost cause.
Yeah, and I also think that sort of whatever the sensibility, I think you and I are going to watch it differently than a lot of people who first saw it, and especially a lot of Americans.
Maybe because we're old, and when you're, maybe when you're young, you respond to it different. That's fair.
And
you know what I mean?
There's that, but and I watched it when I was relatively young, but I think that.
Well, can I ask you one question very quickly?
Sorry, yeah.
Did you feel the same about it then as you do now?
Yeah, the way I feel about it is how I feel about it today, which is I have zero relationship with the film, right?
Right.
But I like so much about it. Whereas there are films that I absolutely love and would go to the mat for, but there is stuff in it that I don't like. There's stuff in some of the movies that I'm like, okay, I don't like that, and I wouldn't have made that decision, but I so love the whole, and I so have a relationship with the film that's fine. Whereas with this movie, there isn't one thing I can pinpoint that I don't like about it. I don't get anything from it either. And I think what it is, And again, I would have to kind of
by the way, I feel very much the same. I think just exactly what you just said is how I feel. There's nothing about it that I don't like. I just didn't get anything from it.
And I think I would have to talk to other British people of our age who kind of grew up with what we grew up with in terms of the country and the culture and the music and the comedy and the films and whatever. Because I've got a feeling that it plays better in America and played better in America and became a bigger cult favorite in America because I think, and maybe around the world, because I think there's a sensibility there that people are trying to grasp hold of and understand and look for meaning in. Either that or is surprising. Whereas I think two guys from England growing up with what we grew up with, the way that we grew up with a sense of humor that we grew up with and the opinions that we grew up with, there's nothing that surprising in Repo Man. There's nothing weird enough in Repo Man that it's going to like make me fall off my chair with, oh my God, how weird, because so much of it I've seen elsewhere. Like you say, either in something like The Young Ones or a Terry Gilliam movie or, some weird little British movie or, a Bonzo Dog routine or whatever. Like, there isn't anything in it that's so fucking left field that I'd be like, oh my God, wow, what a mind blower. And at the same time, there's nothing so like cynical and grumpy in it that I don't feel already. Like I am a grumpy cynic. So like, and I grew up in a land of grumpy cynics, and our armor as British people growing up at a certain time, especially Gen X British people or Zennials, like between Gen X and millennials, whatever, growing up in the 80s and the 90s like we did, we were instilled with grumpy cynicism. We weren't instilled with an American dream that we could do anything or become anything or be anyone. We were instilled with, you might as well just try and be an accountant, and most people are terrible. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what we were filled with. All our comedy, all British comedy is mostly about how terrible people are. It's all about how
pointless life is.
How pointless life is, how sarcastic and how cynical and how awful and how backstabbing and how rude and how terrible and how angry people are. That's all British comedy. It's all about it's about like how nervous, awkward, weird, inward, small, pathetic, nervous people are. Most American comedy is like, look how cool I am and look how funny I am and look what a ready quip I have at my fingertips. Even Seinfeld, which is all about, Seinfeld of all American sitcoms are about four incredibly selfish people and incredibly like deeply flawed selfish people. They're all incredibly deeply flawed selfish people presented to the world in a very like, wouldn't you want to be in this gang type way? You know what I mean? Like, even though they're far more like the humor of Larry David, especially, is far more British than, or far more European than it is American in its celebration of the, the downtrodden, the confused, the angry, the ignorant. But it's still presented in a Kramer still sachets in through the door and the crowd goes, like it's still like, hello, darling, I'm home. Like that's still the current that runs underneath it. Whereas, no one applauds when Basil Fawlty comes in through the door. They might laugh at him, but no one's applauding. Right. So there's no sensibility in Repo Man that makes me go, oh, wow, how original. Oh, wow, how different. Or, oh, I'm not getting it. And I also think that sort of cynicism and comedy, that kind of comedy of cynicism and comedy of sarcasm is done much, much better in other places. I just don't feel like, Harry Dean Stanton looking out the window and just sort of saying his line about like, look at these assholes, ordinary fucking people, I hate them. Like that's a very blunt hammer compared to, some of the cleverer kind of nihilistic or sarcastic or cynical statements that are out there in movies, both British and American. So I just there's all of that that is tied up in it that I wonder whether that's really why I don't engage with it that much. But also, like I said, there's just films out there that I find, you know, I have a better relationship with me, or touch me more, or I have some empathy. You know, Withnell and I is a prime example. Withnell's a terrible character. You wouldn't want to spend more than 5 minutes with him. But ultimately, the success of the movie is that you end up having empathy for him. Like, you can see the point in your life where you were Withnell, and then you can see the point in your life where you became Marwood and walked away. Like, it's about something. It speaks to something within either a human or a very male psyche. I don't know what this speaks to. And if the point of it is like, well, it doesn't speak to anything and you know, jolly japes, you kind of have to say, all right, but therefore it needs to have more japes in it. Like, it needs to have more japes, scrapes, and wackiness in it if the point is none of it means anything. And the last thing I'll say is that like a good comedy, like a good parody, so like a Young Frankenstein or an Airplane, in order for you to hang a series of completely non sequitur, bizarre jokes onto a thing, there has to be a framework there. There has to be a recognizable framework. Even if you're going to do the Holy Grail ending and, you know, just have the police arrest the film crew and it ends, right? Which even the Pythons admit is a shitty ending at this point. As long as most of the film hangs together on a framework you can just accept, like you just say, I know what I'm looking at, I know what they're parodying, now you can do whatever you want because I'm there, I'm with you, I'm already following the journey. You know, all successful comedies and parodies and movies to some extent have a framework I can at least hang some stuff on. This movie starts out with a clear framework, meaning two guys, two curmudgeons in a car, Repo Man. There's going to be a car that they're going to try and repossess, but everyone wants to get it all at once, and everyone wants to get it all at once because there's an alien in it. And you start off and you go, I'm with this movie and I'll accept the wackiness. And then about halfway through the movie, you realize it's as if the police arresting all of Holy Grail at the end of the movie happened halfway through and they didn't bother to write a second half of the film. That's how it feels like with Repo Man. You start off with a place going, Alex, I'm with you. I get it. I'm with you. I know what you're trying to. You've got two disparate stories and you're trying to tie them together, and it's going to be jolly japes with Repo Men trying to catch a killer car that's got an alien in it or whatever. But then it's at a certain point, it either doesn't have anywhere to go, or it just keeps repeating itself. Either one, it doesn't. Either one, the framework on which you're trying to hang your bizarre and or nihilistic things on has fallen apart midway through the film. And the fact that it even, you know, crawls over the finish line is something to be applauded, because there's nothing in the second half of the movie. Not that there's much in the first half of the movie, but there's nothing in the second half of the movie whatsoever. It's completely lost, most of it, and it just does stuff for the sake of doing stuff. And so that's, I mean, if I'm going to be hypercritical, that's what I'm going to say about it. Outside of that, like I said, I really love the like grungy LA. I don't think Emilio Estevez is particularly well cast as a punk kid. Like, he's too square and too just, I know he's not flabby, but he's kind of flabby. Do you know what I mean by that?
No, I know what you mean. He doesn't look like a punk. He looks different from all the other punks in the movie. You know, he just looks like what he looked like in Breakfast Club. You know what I mean? Yeah. He just looks like the same character.
It's yeah, like, I think that's the other thing, is that none of the punk stuff in it feels authentic. There's a TV series right now, a Canadian TV series called Letterkenny, which is on Hulu. and it's a very hyper real comedy series, which is about 3 different groups of kind of Canadian stereotypes. And one of the Canadian stereotypes is these kind of like goth kid skateboarders that are always hanging outside, clubs and bars and stuff, just like all wearing black hoodies, all with like metal stud bracelets or metal stud earrings, all trying to do stuff on their skateboards, and all listening to like shitty music. And it's meant to be, like an ironic observation of a stereotype. But what's funny about Repo Man is, like, that's how the punks are presented in Repo Man. Like, they're all just outside of a building, like, just like spray painting a building and like kind of fighting with each other, but not. And
you're right. It does have that exact feeling that like he's using punks the same way some square 70-year-old Hollywood director who knows he needs to put punks in his movie uses them.
Right.
It's the same.
Right. So I don't know. Like, I just come back to there's a lot I love in the movie, but it doesn't really ring any bells with me. Do you have anything?
It doesn't yank my plank.
I've rambled a lot, but you might need to say some stuff quickly before we.
No. I actually agree with everything you said. There's a lot about it that I like, but it didn't grab me. I don't admire anything about it. None of it felt particularly fresh to me. It felt like, I don't know. It just, I think you put your finger on it. Like, the Emilio Estevez thing is actually much bigger maybe than I realized. That he doesn't look like a punk. He doesn't look like an outsider. He just looks like generic lead, young man lead in movie. So he doesn't feel like he represents anything except I am the lead character in a movie. And if that's not what he is, it's not as if he does anything or goes anywhere or has any, leading man in movie stuff to do, that you can then build other things around that. Right? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you can have a boring lead if like the people around them are funny or interesting or the setup or whatever, right? But if you just got if he's supposed to be emblematic of nihilism and alienation and whatever, then you can't cast someone who looks, like he just stepped out of the Breakfast Club. And that's not to like diss Estevez or whatever, but he doesn't look the part. He doesn't. It's
certainly a bold move for someone like Estevez, who is coming up through the Brat Pack and
the Estevez ranks,
expected to be, a certain type of person. Having been in The Outsiders, he's about to do Breakfast Club. When he does this, he goes on to.
He hasn't done Breakfast Club yet. Okay.
No. But it's interesting that he does this, and then a few years later he does Maximum Overdrive, and then every so often he does and then he does Men at Work in 1990 and Free Jack. Like every so often, Estevez dips his toe into the world of the weird a little bit, which is not surprising considering he comes from the Sheen clan, and Martin Sheen was also known to be one of. Someone who was sort of interested in arty, weird bollocks, as well as being a leading man in Hollywood. And so it's interesting to see him play this part. It's difficult because in The Breakfast Club, the thing that epitomizes his character is this bluster and anger that's really covering up the insecurity of the fact that he's not 100% sure that he wants to be a jock, and that he's pushed as far as he is by his dad and all the rest of it. In this, his anger and his, two fingers up at society kind of attitude, it doesn't really have anything living underneath it. Like it doesn't have any.
You're right. It's not protecting anything. It's not trying to achieve anything. It's just in the absence of anything else. In fact, nearly everything in the movie happens. Right, nearly everything in the movie happens in the absence of anything else.
Right. Oh, and that's the other thing that I just remembered was also stolen is he picks up the girl in the car, and then they decide like, oh, we'll go in the back of the car and we'll have sex, and it's all sped up just like Clockwork Orange. And like actually now the more that I think about it, you know, Alex in A Clockwork Orange and Emilio Estevez's character in this, you can kind of see what Cox is trying to do. Even though obviously Clockwork Orange is slightly more successful with it. And slightly more actually anarchistic. You know, the most anarchistic thing that Emilio Estevez does in this movie is pour a beer out on the floor. Like, that's the most anarchistic thing he does.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
The one running gag in it that I really like is the fact that every time they leave the liquor store, it's being held up by a group of people. Like I do like that as like a running joke, but that's about it. Anyway, I can tell you're getting tired.
Sorry, mate. So what are we? How are we continuing? Are we gonna take suggestions? Do we want to?
Well, we didn't promote the album this time round at all, but everyone should go listen to "I've Been There" by.
Oh yeah. Well, if you want to do something tied into that as a season, I still like my idea, but
what I'd really like is if you told me how much you loved the album over and over again. That's really what I would like.
But we could do you want to do like a season of that? Like a season
of you
like
telling me how...
Part 1, I talk about how great the album is. And then part 2, I talk about how brilliant the album is. And then part 3, we discuss the enormity of its brilliance. Yeah. And then part 4, we discuss the breadth of its ingenuity.
I wonder if... Because there's 12 tracks on the album.
Right.
And they're all 2-word titles. And they're all titles that we could use to inspire different film viewings.
Okay.
I think. Just about.
So you're saying...
I'm saying...
We would do 12 movies?
We do 12 movies.
Inspires like a movie choice?
Yeah. I just think you go away this week. Look at the titles of the songs on the album.
Okay.
And think... Do any of them make you go, oh, that movie?
Okay.
I don't know.
So what's the vision here of the season? It's it's a 12 movie season? Or?
It would allow us to play the song, talk a little bit about the song, and then for you to say, and here's the movie that I was inspired to pick based on that song or based on the title of the song.
Okay.
And that movie could be a VOD movie with Christian Slater in it. Like, I don't know. But I'm saying you go away, look at the song titles and pick. Well, we don't have to do all 12, but pick 4 or 6, like maybe we pick half the album or something. Pick 4 to 6 titles that speak to you, and then pick like 4 to 6 movies we could watch based on those things.
Okay. All right, we'll do that. Are we picking them together, or I'm picking them? I'm picking the movies.
Yeah, you can pick the movies, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't make them like really awful.
Okay. All right,
dude. And try and watch them before 10 o'clock next time.
Yeah, okay. I will do that. Yeah, that sounds good.
But this was a good convo, man. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah, thanks. Sorry if it was a bit...
no, it's fine.
Towards the end, but no, I enjoyed it. It was always good to talk to you, man.
No, I'm glad my energy got up.
I'm glad you're settled in Connecticut.
Dude, I can't wait for you to come here. It's just amazing. It's the best.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
All right, man. All the best. Speak soon.
Right. Take care, dude. Bye.
Bye. Let me tell you all about the horror Let me tell you where you were going wrong. Let me tell you what you should be watching. Let me show you it was there waiting for you all along. Let me be the one and only arbiter. Let me hold your hand and let me show you the way. Let me hide behind a name that isn't mine. Let me never be around when you finally found the words you want to say. Let the boundaries you're protecting stay strongly guarded. Let your gaze remain true and fixed. Let all who dare oppose you be removed and silenced. Let there never be a treat behind each one of your tricks. Let the lines you track one day come and get you. Let the world around you know who you support. Let everything be all around you and you alone. Let me tell you who to befriend and who you should report. Let this machine dictate every single color. Let the definitions you believe be tight and strict. Let your borrowed voices ring from head to head. Let the way be clear and straight and void of conflict. Let the boundaries you're protecting stay strongly guarded. Let your gaze remain true and fixed. Let all who dare oppose you be removed and silenced. Let there never be a treat behind each one of your tricks. Let the things that you just read about be immovable. Let everything you overhear be set in stone. Let one day suddenly all our eyes be open